Anybody recognize the song we just played? I feel like it's kind of our anthem. That quote, the song comes from the quote in 2 Timothy 4:7. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And I prepared the topic for this message last night, and this morning it has a new meaning. But life is crazy right now. It was interesting. I had somebody for our school who wanted to meet with me this week. She's planning on sending her children, but her husband hasn't come and seen the school yet. And she messaged me. She was like, "Is there any time this week that my husband could just come and see the place and meet with you?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. I have no time." Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I attended a guide gathering at another Acton school. Very wonderful and inspiring, and I have a lot of tips from it, but it was kind of like all day, every day, and my sister arrived, and then we're trying to renovate our house before we're moving in today, and I'm preparing a message for today, and I was like, nope, I am not putting anything else in my life right now. But we were renovating yesterday. We were working on house, trying to do curtains. I was up till 11 last night scrubbing paint out of the fireplace so that I could get the chemicals out before we move in. And when Mike, I just tend to think about things, and even though I like music, I never think to put it on, but Mike has a playlist of songs that he listens to whenever he's working. And we were listening to a lot of songs by like Jim Croce and John Denver. And both of those artists died in plane crashes. And we talked about how it was like such a shame that we don't get to listen to the songs that they would have written, that if they had lived, that they could both easily still be alive today if they had lived a long life, but they haven't. But then we also talked about how many celebrities, as time goes by, their lives don't necessarily get more inspiring. A lot of artists end up dying from overdoses or have really disastrous relationships, and in the end, feel like, they seem more like a hero in their heyday, but then it kind of fades. And it reminded me of this quote from, I think it's from Batman, and probably you've heard it, but I think it's Batman. It says, "You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain." And it's a very not inspiring quote, but I also think it's a good reminder to us to think about, how am I intentionally living my life so that my whole life becomes a reflection of my goals, my purpose, my ideals. If we are lucky, life is long, and we go through many seasons in our life. When we're young, we think life is a certain way, right? We just experience life as it is. And then we get older, and then things change. We see our parents in a different light. We see the world in a different light. And we start to see ourselves in a different light. And then different challenges come. And we go through all these different ups and downs and seasons, and we can't expect them to stay the same. But also, if we don't have like a vision for ourselves of where I want to go and who I want to be on the way there, then it's very easy to become buffeted by the winds of life, or overcome by the challenges, or tempted off the path into things that derail us. So how can we go through a whole lifetime and not lose sight of our purpose? That's a really big question. So consistency in faith is one thing. This quote says, "I have kept the faith." And, I think about Mark, and I don't know how well all of you know Mark, and I've only known him the last 8 years or so since we've been pastoring here, but he feels very comfortable to talk to me, and I have a lot of conversations with him. And Mark is a very interesting person because he has a lot of questions. He has a lot of questions about life and death and what happens afterwards and what does this mean in my faith. He would ask me these questions, which always kept me on my toes, And he didn't necessarily have the answers for those questions, and I didn't necessarily feel like I could just give him an answer that would be the be-all, end-all either. It was really more of like an exploration and a conversation about faith. But what I loved about Mark was that he always, even if he was struggling something, he'd always be coming back, and he'd always find something, a gold nugget in a message that we shared, and be like, this is why I'm here. This reminds me of why I first joined this movement. That's still in my heart, and I know this to be true. And I know love is true, and I know if we live according to love, that will solve the other things. So I dedicate this message to Mark, keeping the faith. So consistency in faith is one thing, but then also, what is faith without the practice of it? The expression of it in my life. What do we do with our life? Right? It's one thing to say, I believe in God. My whole life I believed in God. Ta-da! But what does that look? What does faith look like expressed? Right? So I would say more important than keeping a faith the whole life is how do I live my life as an expression of my faith consistently to the end, whether that end comes tomorrow or whether it comes in 50 years. What is your purpose? What do you feel called to in your life? And how will you pursue it throughout your life? And I know that, as I mentioned, life is long and there are many seasons. And so sometimes, at one point in our life, we think my purpose will look like this. And then sometimes we have to adjust a little bit of how that plays out. Or sometimes we are on a path and the path ends. And we have to backtrack a little bit and find a new way forward. Sometimes we have to make adjustments, or sometimes we have to do something over again that we thought, oh man, I already did this, I have to do it again. So, what is a life well lived? Is it a life that goes the way we planned? Because if a life well lived is the life that goes the way we planned, I think we've probably all failed by now, right? If a life doesn't have setbacks, is that a life well lived? No, we would all fail at life early on if it's that things go according to the way we want them to go and the way we planned they would go, and I don't make mistakes. But I think about examples that we have in our life. I think what's really amazing about the human spirit is that we all have something deep inside of us that reflects who God is. We are all God's children. We all have a nature that reflects God's character, God's heart, God's passion. And so I think we can actually look in our lives and find people who we say, oh, this is an example of somebody who traveled their whole life despite challenges, despite difficulties, but they never changed their heart. And I really admire that person. I hope you all have at least somebody in your life that you can think of. But also we have the examples of Jesus. And his life was a shorter life. And I think sometimes we think of Jesus as, oh, he is God's son. His life was a miracle. And his path was set out, and he followed the path. And he died on the cross as God ordained. And so everything went according to plan, and it was amazing. But Jesus himself expressed many times his frustrations that the people didn't understand the words he was trying to say. It was that, oh, rush hour. You understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. Sometimes I feel like Jesus must have been like that. And he said, oh, Jerusalem, I would that I could gather you under my arms like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you're not getting it, So, and that was during his ministry, but he really faced the ultimate test at his death, right? When he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, if it be possible, let this bitter cup pass from me. But not as I will, as you will. And so Jesus was like, is there any other way that I could accomplish your will? Not because I'm scared of dying, but because there's so much more I want to do for you. So this is an example of somebody whose heart never changed throughout their life, despite setbacks, despite adversity. And I think we can't underestimate the power of a life well lived. Because when Jesus died, it looked like everything was gone. Even his disciples abandoned him on the way to the cross. He walked alone. So from that perspective, it was a failure. And yet we know that Jesus lives and that his impact has permeated the entire world and is still changing hearts today. And we also look at the life of Reverend Moon, who we call our true father, the founder of our faith. And he got to live a much longer life. And in some ways, I feel like this is a case where if you live long enough, you could see yourself become the villain, but he didn't, right? For 90 years, never changing his message, never changing his passion, never changing the direction he was going, despite whatever happens in the world, despite whatever happens in our church community, despite whatever happens in his family, right? Always, forever and always, the one message and one passion in his life. This is a quote from him. Suppose that you have been defeated 10 times. You must be determined to win on the 11th try. That kind of person will be sure to win over the others. After many failures, you must stand firm and feel even more challenged, and you would say to yourself, after such failures, I have experienced many things and learned many lessons, so this time I will not be defeated. You must resolve to have that kind of determination. You can't say these kind of words unless you live these kind of words, right? So I think sometimes we feel like, fall down. If at first you don't succeed, try again. 3rd time's the charm. But what if it takes 7 times? What if it takes 10 times? How committed are we to God's calling on my heart? How committed are we to our purpose? So what matters is that we know where we want to go and who we want to be on that journey. Because the reality is, we may not make it to where we want to go, especially if you have a really big dream. If you have a really big vision, we might be like Moses. We might not see the promised land. But who am I on that journey is more important even than the place I want to get to. So how do I do that, though? I think first we have to avoid the things that we know will try to derail us. So things that we find as temptations, addictions, bad habits. These are things that despite, I know where I want to go, I know who I want to be, these things will always try to pull us off. So in what ways can I address these? In what ways can addictions are not usually something that comes into your life. It's usually something that's missing in your life that you try to fill with the addiction. So what is the hole in my heart that I need to fill with God and real love and real relationships so that I don't need these other things? So the first is to avoid the things that threaten to derail us. And the second is to develop the habits and the relationships that will sustain us to the end. So if I want to be this person and I want to get to this goal, then what does that mean actually? If it's not just an idea in my head, then what steps do I need to take? Do I need to find God more really in my life? Do I need to pray more? Do I need to read more? Do I need to find good mentors? What is it that I need that will help give me energy when I'm feeling low? Because no matter what, there will be times when you just don't know if it's worth it. I just don't know if I can go another step. I don't know if this is worth the energy. I guarantee you those times will be there. So if you know that those times are coming, then you got to have something in your back pocket ahead of time. Who can I rely on that I can go to when I'm struggling to ask for help? What habit can I develop now so that even though I feel good right now, I'm inspired right now, what habit can I develop now so that when I stumble, I've got something to fall back on? And then the relationships. Nobody can do it on our own. God created us in relationships. And so, who's in your life that speaks life into you? Who's in your life who maybe will give you a kick in the butt when you need it? Who in your life is actually part of your goal? Because for myself, I know my family is part of my goal and mission in life. So it's very important to me to develop and sustain my family relationships. So the two things: avoid the things that threaten to derail us, and also be strong enough, courageous enough to look inside and find what are the hurts that I have, what are the holes that I need to fill with good things so that I don't need the bad things. And then also, what are the habits and relationships that I need to develop to carry me forward all the way. Partly this message was inspired by a quote, actually not a religious quote, but I find it very moving. Some of you know one of our presidents, Teddy Roosevelt. He was just one of these super adventurous people. And I learned on a hike with Roger at one point that they were actually going to build a White House for him here in Colorado. He wanted to have like his residence in the capital of America to be in Colorado. It never actually happened. But he had that kind of Colorado spirit. And after his presidency, he gave a number of speeches. And I just want to finish with a quote from his that I really feel is a very passionate expression that you can relate to the life of Jesus, to the life of Reverend Moon, and I hope that you can also relate this to your life. And if you're, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read it. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, because sometimes the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. I got a text this week that told me how I could be doing things better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I don't know how you feel when you read that. I can relate to both sides because I have a strong temptation to just let things play out and watch it happen and not be responsible for the outcomes because it's scary. But I am working really hard to embrace being in the arena, getting dirty, getting muddy, getting bloody. And I feel much more alive that way. So let's fight the good fight. Know that it's worth it. Avoid the temptations and pitfalls, and find the habits and the people in your life who will help sustain you to the end. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for a beautiful, cool morning. We gathered here as your children, and each one of us has been on our own path. Sometimes the path is smooth, but more often than not, we find that it's rocky, it's steep. Sometimes it gets lost in the woods. But I pray that we can be encouraged by your words that you will never leave us, you will always be by our side, and you are guiding us and encouraging us to let our light shine and to not be intimidated so much that we just go to the sidelines, that we hide our light. We are so grateful for examples that we have in our life of people like Jesus who, despite all challenges and everything against him, refused to back down, refused to hide his light, and continued to speak truth to the very end. And I pray that even though our life might look different and we have a different path to walk and a different purpose, I pray that we can take courage from that and find our own way to never give up, to keep our eyes on you, and to never regret the person that we are as we walk that path. Heavenly Parent, we just thank you so much for your always being with us, whether we see you or not, And we offer this time to you, and I pray this in my name, Michael and Adonia Hendrick, with Placental family. Amen and adieu. Okay, thank you.